Hi, I'm Andy from Bike Build Ride. This is my FAQ video following a lot of questions we had about this bike. Adventure Rider did a really great review of it, came out on the 16th, and there's been huge interest in it, which is great. Loads of questions, so I'm going to go through all the questions I've gathered together from different medium platforms and try to answer all of those questions. So I guess, first of all, a lot of people ask me what the spec of the bike is, a little bit more detail about what's actually involved. So let's cover that first of all. This is a 2015 CRF500L with a Honda CB500X engine in it. Remaining from the CRF500L is the frame, swing arm, the rear subframe, airbox, radiator, and I think that's about it. The seat, although the seat's modified. The rest of it, and the plastics are all standard CRF500L. Everything else is either modified or comes from other Honda bikes. So obviously the CB500 engine, the loom, that all comes from Honda. The front end, the forks, triple trees, front wheel, front fender is all from a Honda CRF450X. And the rest is probably aftermarket. So things like the handguards and the whole of the rally mount that's on the front is from Highway dirt bikes. We've got seat from Seat Concepts. They make probably some of the best seats. Certainly I'm a big fan of theirs. Exhaust is custom made, the bash plate is custom made, and we start to get into this position where when you build bikes like this, that a lot of parts just won't bolt on, you have to make your own. So there are quite a few modified or constructed parts that we've had to add for the bike. I've had to add for the bike. But that basically covers it. The engine weighs about 9 kilos more than the 250L engine, which is not a light single on its own. It's about 9 kilos more. It makes twice the horsepower, so 47 brake horsepower, about 3 times the torque. Really wish I could remember the torque figure for it. But about 3 times the torque of that 250 single engine, which makes it a very punchy, easy to ride bike. And that was the goal. The goal was to try to make something very, very smooth, doing long distance off-road or on-road, able to manage both of those very, very well. Very fuel efficient, only carries 12.5 litres of fuel in here, still do close to 200 miles off that. And I guess probably the big difference that everyone's interested, what does it weigh? 156 kilos, fully fueled, everything on it, including toolkit that sits under the seat and on the back here. I've got a compressor and I run a water drinking system on the front as well. So including all of those parts, then we're probably hitting somewhere around about 162 with the accessories that are on it. But the bike itself, 156 kilos fully fueled. And that was kind of lucked out. I was hoping for 155, got to 156. Quite happy with that. It's not too bad. So moving into some of the questions. So it's obviously the big one that a lot of people asked, which was around a comment I made about why a twin engine in a dual sport bike and not a single. Now, I've owned a lot of single cylinder bikes. A lot of people ask me about 690s, 701s, whatever they're called, 700 ES, I think, or GS, the gas version. Why I wouldn't just pick a 690? More power than this, lighter than this, originally from the shop. And I've owned 2 690s of my own, fully rally rated, both of them, trying to get them to kind of adventure bike status. And in fact, a couple of my friends that I ride with all the time, one of which is filming this right now, they both own 701s as well, and I've ridden both of their bikes. And this post-2019 dual balancer engine is much, much better. I'm quite a big fan of it, I quite like it. But for me, it's always come down to the same problem that bike's had, and that's the reason why I got rid of my 2 690s. It has not changed the whole time KTM's been building that bike, and that's the gearbox. I had endless amounts of frustration trying to gear that bike to be able to do everything I want to do with a bike. Okay, you may enjoy your 690, you may love the way it rides on-road and off-road at the same time. I found it, you either geared it for off-road and it was a pain on-road, or you geared it for road and it was a pain off-road. You ended up seeking backwards and forwards through gears all the time. And I found that really frustrating, and I wasn't prepared to spend, I can't remember what it is, what Linden charges, 2.5, 3 grand for a Nova gearbox for it. And then if you exclude that and say, okay, the gearbox is an issue with the 690, the rear tank is a bit of a pain if you're carrying luggage, there are a few things around it. If you wanted a light, powerful dirt bike, then why would you not just buy a 500 EXE and customize and modify that? A lot of people do that. that's, you know, that's an option. So it's not that I dislike the 690 or the 701, it's that I really don't like single bike vibes. I really don't like specifics around the 690, or I would have kept mine. I wanted something that's much smoother, much more fuel efficient, that gives me the kind of reliable transportation that I want. So that covers that off. My apologies if you thought I was dissing 690s or 701s. I wasn't. It's just my personal preferences around what I want to do. And a lot of the things you'll hear me say is my opinion on stuff. It's not, you know, it might disagree with the way you do it. So let's move on. Let's get away from that single conversation and let's go to legalities. So we had a couple of questions about how do I get this bike on the road? How do I register it? Amazingly, here in the UK, this was surprisingly easy. You fill in a form with your V5 ownership papers, you send it off to the DVLA, and on that form you give the new engine figures, so the capacity of it, the brake horsepower, or Newton meters I think actually they want for it, and the new engine number, and about 2.5 to 3 weeks later they send it all back to you with a new V5. And that's as hard as it is in the UK to get a new engine into a bike. Even if it's a bigger engine or a change in capacity or a change in power, that's all you have to do. Now, that doesn't get you past your insurance company, obviously. They do want a little bit more. So they look at, in this case, they looked at the modifications that I made, and obviously there are pages of that. And eventually they sent an engineer out to take a look at the bike. Guy turns up, really nice and friendly, looked around the bike, tested a few things. The only thing he requested that made change was he wanted a larger front disc. To improve the stopping power, because obviously the weight's gone up from a 250L. So fortunately, obviously I'm running this 450X front wheel, and it comes with, or an option to get a larger front disc on there. So I put the larger front disc, sent it to the engineer, and he signed off on it. And I've insured it, MOT'd it every year since. So for the last, I finished 26, 9 years, 8 years that I've been running this bike, it's passed through its MOT every time. I have no problems with insurance. Everything is documented here. They are aware of every modification I've made, every change I've made to the bike over the years. I've notified them, so it's completely road legal. Okay, so that covers that off. The next part, the next question was, okay, building more kits. Can I give a build list? I'm not going to build another one of these. I would struggle now, I think, to find the motivation to build another one, having already got one. I think if I'd started, if maybe things like the Cove 450 or, oh, there's a single again. Some of the 450s that are coming out now, they look really quite interesting. There's a Mondial that looks really interesting, very similar, a little bit heavier than this. In fact, most of the production 450s are a lot heavier than this. I think I would struggle to get motivated to do this. At the time when I built this back in 2016, there was nothing else. The nearest thing maybe was 220 kilos for a twin cylinder bike. Can I give you a kit list? I can certainly go through the things that I purchased for this bike, and I think they're pretty well documented. I have a build thread on advrider.com. I'll put a link to that in the description here. That documents the whole build of this bike and then some of the modifications that come with it. There are links in there and on my YouTube channel to the first start video when we first put the engine on. Never been so nervous in my life. A 3 year later build when I talked about some of the modifications and changes I've made to the bike since then. So that's all within the ADV Rider, and I'm fairly certain within there is a spreadsheet list of all the things I purchased for this bike to get it working. If it's not, by the time this video goes live, I'll check and I'll post up a link to all of the parts you need for this. Construction wise, and this is probably the next question that's on the list, what changes do you need to make the bike, to make the engine fit? And this is probably the big crux of how do you get a 500cc twin engine into a 250 single frame. I did touch on this in the video with Adventure Rider. There are cuts made to the frame here and back here around the engine cradle. The cradle itself is opened wider. The headstock, which sits obviously in front of the engine at the front, is lapped out a little bit. You need a bit more space. The engine is obviously physically larger. New frame rails are built to go round the 500 engine, and the new engine mounts for all of the mounting points on that 500 engine have to be created. None of the original mounts fit. Nothing from the 250L engine fits on the 500, unfortunately. But that is, realistically, that's the big change to the frame. In fact, it's the only modification to the frame that's done. You do have to modify the loom. Obviously the loom comes from a CB500. The clocks come from a CB500. Ignition coils, they're all part of that electrical system. Now obviously you have to fit the pieces of that loom somewhere. So there are big, diodes and relay boxes. The ECU all sits up here behind this side of the frame where the CRF500L stuff was. Fuse box is all back on the left hand side. But you have to do quite a lot of modification to the loom. So there's some cutting and shortening, there's some lengthening to do to that. I think I describe it in the build thread as the loom of doom. It did take me quite a long time to modify that. I have a background in electronics. I'm not a bike builder, by the way. I work in cybersecurity, but I do have a background in electronics. So actually the loom was just a case of you just have to go through wire by wire, make it the right length, make sure it works, and then put the modifications in that you want. Probably the big difficult parts, frame cut, and then the connection between the airbox and the throttle bodies. Throttle bodies to the engine are standard CB500, but we're using the CRF250 airbox. We have a Uniflow Australia filter within there, gives us a good airflow, but I had to build a custom connector between the airbox. Obviously it's dual connector where it was a single before. And I did touch on this as well in the video for Adventure Rider, is there are some issues around air robbing between the two cylinders as they breathe and they intake air. It's a 180-degree firing cycle, so when one is pulling air, it can pull air from the other side of the airbox. So to build a divider, create separate connections between the airbox and the throttle bodies. So that was a little tricky. I messed up the first time. You'll see it in the build thread. I built a really lovely hand-beaten aluminium connector from the airbox to the throttle bodies. It was fabulous. It didn't work very well at all. The bike was quite inefficient with it. You didn't make the right power. It was quite complex. So now it's a simpler system, 2 separated connections, which is working much, much better. And then the other side of that, which again I talked about in the video, is a full custom exhaust we created for the bike. Originally I used the old CB500 headers to kind of about here, where they were cut, and we made a custom exhaust back to the end can. That wasn't particularly well balanced. The bike's quite temperamental on the diameters and the length before the collector and the size of the pipe after the collector and the distance to the air to the end can. Once those things are sorted though, the bike returns back to its fantastic economy, and I'm getting 65 plus miles to the gallon green laning, which is a very inefficient way of riding a motorbike. On the run though, when we're doing long distance events, easily getting over 70 miles to the gallon on this bike. The engine is fabulous. And one of the great things about having a very efficient engine is you don't need a lot of fuel capacity. So a few people have said, oh, you need more fuel capacity, 12.5 litres is not enough. Trust me, at 200 miles riding this bike, I want to stop for some fuel. I want to stop for something anyway, but getting up to 200 miles is a great range for this, especially you can ride almost all day off-road with it. Okay, then moving on, let's talk about how do I compare it against other bikes? Oh, that's great. You can't see it's off camera at the moment. I've got a Cove 800. It was reviewed as well by Adventure Rider. I've done quite a bit of work on that. I'm also selling it, which is really strange because it looked fantastic in the video and I really praised it. I'm selling it because I'm buying another Cove, a Cove 800 Rally. So I've spent a lot of work on that. It's really interesting riding the two because they're both twin cylinder, they're both off-road focused. Obviously more off-road focus on the CRF, a lot more power, double the power in the Cove. Does it make it easier to ride? No, it makes it a lot of fun, the Cove. But if I'm riding anywhere where I don't know the surface, what the conditions are going to be, like for example, I did the Tet down through France into Spain last year. I didn't know what the weather conditions were going to be like. I've never ridden that part of the Tet before. I would take this bike anywhere because I have absolute confidence I can ride it off-road it through pretty much anything, and I had no problems. I don't think I dropped it once on that whole trip. It's a really great bike for confidence inspiring and riding. And actually, while we're on that subject, people ask me about journeys I've done. I've pretty much done most of the Tet south of Wales, done the West Country, the loop around south of London, all up through Gloucester and up into Wales. I've done Tet work around the top of Spain, Picos on this bike. Multiple events. I think I've done 6 events with Austin Vince in the Pyrenees and various areas on this bike as well. It carries luggage really well. Obviously it's a CRF500L, so there's quite quite a strong steel subframe here, which by the way bolts on off, which is a real benefit, especially after I broke the last one. But I run adventure spec side carriers when I'm traveling, so they're actually on the floor over there, and I just do throw over luggage. So if you think about something like a Alt-Rider hemisphere bag, which is what I use, or the Rhino walk bags, I've had those on here as well. It carries luggage really well. You can still ride it, you still get access to the full seat, which is really nice. Okay, that talks about that. Someone did ask me, or did say, well, there's no way the frame is strong enough to hold a 500 engine and the power that it makes. I absolutely disagree. I've done 23,000 miles, I think, now on this bike. No problems. I keep an eye on it on a regular basis. I go through the frame. I've had the engine out multiple times doing various different things. I always check and look at where the frame is. It's holding up brilliantly well. I'm absolutely certain Honda over-engineered this when they built the 250L. It's not a light frame. It is a steel frame. It seems to be very strong. The changes we've made, I think, have only strengthened that frame. So I've never had any problems with it. I've never had any concerns that the frame's not going to hold up. I don't see why it wouldn't. I've heard the 300 frame, the newer 300 frame, is lighter, and they've cut back on some of the strength with it. I've no idea what, that's anecdotal I've heard off the internet. All I do know is, of all the hell I've put this bike through and all the different journeys I've done and trips all loaded down with luggage, you know, even camping and you know, really harsh riding, it's held up absolutely brilliantly. Okay, so we've talked about that, talked about trips. Radiation and cooling, that's another question. Oh, let's go through the mods, and we'll include radiation and cooling in that as well. So what have I modified? Well, this is going to be a really, really long section. Let's start with the really obvious stuff. So let's start at the front. Obviously, the CRF500X front end forks. The reason why I went the 450X forks is I wanted more ground clearance. I run a CRF Rally rear shock from YSS. With the Rally linkages, it gives you about 1.5 inches more ground clearance. The CRF450 forks match that for ground clearance, so get a nice balance between the front and back. The forks themselves are much higher quality than obviously the CRF ones, which are shockingly bad, excuse the pun. Yeah, so CRF450 front end. I am running SM Pro wheels, so I have a wheel set from SM Pro, 450X front and back with a cush drive. I switched out to that because I wanted the cush drive for the rear wheel. I think I touched on this as well, is the CRF250L has a slipper clutch in it. The CB500 has a cush drive in it. Obviously, I don't have either of those in this combination I have on the bike, so I had to do something, put a cush drive on the rear wheel. And the SM Pro wheels are holding up really, really well. I run tubeless. I don't know if anyone noticed this piece of metal down here is obviously part of the tubeless fitting kit. I run tubeless, and I have done for probably 10,000 miles now. I've had one blowout on it, and that was totally my fault. I managed to completely destroy a chain and it at my back wheel before this wheel set. The tubeless system I find absolutely fantastic. I wouldn't ride with tubes again by choice. Okay, modifications. Okay, highway dirt bikes is the whole Rally front end that we've got here. The screen is something different. This came from AliExpress. But you can just see it here, this white section here, all the way through to the headstock mount, which is where the power switches are, and they're wonderful handguards, fantastic. I love these little fold-in mirrors. They work brilliantly. They give you a really great view, one on both sides when I'm abroad. That whole set's for obviously highway dirt bikes in America. I've got a drinking system on the front here on a lovely set of, I routed it wrong, on a lovely set of magnets. I hate wearing backpacks, can't stand camelbacks. So I run that as a bottle on the front side there that runs that. I've got a compressor here, 12-volt power supply. I've got a Scott steering damper, probably can't see it from the angle the camera's at here, that sits underneath the highway dirt bikes. Part of that, the mounting is part of that highway dirt bikes kit. Krieger pull strap. Coming backwards, Acibis, we talked about a 12.5 litre tank, seat concept seat. I've got a titanium bash plate, I'm not joking. I've had this from the beginning. It's done 20,000 miles on it. There's barely a mark on it. It does spark rather nicely in the evenings, but incredibly strong. But of course it had to be custom made. Obviously the frame rails are nothing like a 250L's, nothing would have fitted. So bought that and mounted it. I've actually mounted it on rubber mounts as well, just to give myself a little bit of cushioning, because the titanium's quite, well, it's obviously very, very strong, but it's also would transfer straight to the frame otherwise. So now I've got some mounts to move that. Moving back. Custom exhaust we talked about, a really cheap, horrible, and I really don't like the noise it makes. Exhaust. I'd much prefer the one I had before, but then I flipped the bike backwards or over handlebars and smashed up the old exhaust. The plastics are all from Bike Parts, Bike Bits, I think it is, in Thailand. Great place to buy CRF parts, by the way, or any Honda parts if you don't like paying full price. I've got some grip rails here that I run my bag off. He's going to kill me because I can't remember the name of the company. I will link it in the thing. He was really, really nice guy. He does a lot of really cool ABS plastic elements. And that's really, I guess, probably at full speed, most of the modifications to the bike. Obviously, you know, foot pegs and the standard sort of accessories that we'd normally put. That's the sort of changes that I've done to it. Now I'm trying to work out, oh, and then cooling. So it actually has a standard CRF500L radiator on it. It runs a slightly larger fan. I did have some issues with it when I first built the bike, and it used to overheat, and I actually have a little temperature gauge up here that tells me what the water temperature is in the bike. I actually found out that the problem wasn't the radiator, the problem was my ability to burp the air out of it. I fixed that, changed it, or cleared the air out of the system, and it's been fantastic ever since. I think we did 42 or 43 degrees riding through Toulouse off-road. It never overheated or boiled over. It's been really great since I've fixed the my issue with the bleeding out the water system. So just a standard CRF500L. I actually bought a performance radiator for it. It would have been a real pain to try and fit. I ended up selling it off because I just didn't need it. Where are we doing? Okay, done that. I think we're getting there. Oh, seat height, 38 inches. Someone did ask me, well, it's 38 inches while it's on this stand, so it's probably about 37 inches. It is quite plush though, so it does sink a little bit when you get on the bike. I built it to be really comfortable. I don't like hard race suspension. It's pretty compliant, but it's really, really fun to ride. I found it very comfortable off-road, and I can ride it for hours. I've done 3 12-hour back-to-back days riding off-road on it. Never had a problem. In fact, actually, I found it easy on day two and even easier on day 3. So it's a very comfortable bike to ride, and that's, you know, part of why it was constructed in the first place. I do run by the way, I didn't touch on this, I do run an Android Auto screen up here, or I suppose the Apple version if you're into Apple stuff, which I'm not. This just runs my navigation. It just means I can keep my phone on me. I'm really paranoid about losing my phone or getting disconnected from it if the phone was on the bike. So actually the Android Auto screen's a really simple way of just doing navigation without having to take anything off your phone. Everything runs on my phone. So I'd rather keep it on me. So if I fall from the bike, I've still got the phone with me. But the screen allows me to do that. And I think that's about, really hoping I've covered a lot of the questions that everybody had. If I haven't, please, in the comments, I will try and answer these just straight in the comments this time. I'm trying not to do another video. But yeah, if you've got any questions for things that I've missed, or you've asked questions my apologies, I haven't covered in this video. Hopefully I've covered everything. If you are interested in building your own version of this, a number of people have messaged me asking for advice. Please go through my build thread. I think there are 12 of these bikes either finished or in construction at some point. I think there are now 3 in the UK. There are people around with a lot of experience. I'm happy to help. If you've got questions about a build of your own, please ask away. Oh, I know what I was going to touch on. How did I start? What did I start with? I bought a CRF500L stolen recovered bike from a insurance write-off place. It had done 500 miles when I bought it. I think it was less than 6 months old. The only thing damaged in it was the loom and the steering. The lock and the steering lock. All things I didn't want on the bike anyway. Didn't need the loom, so didn't care about that. So yeah, that's how I started. I started with this brand new bike. I was amazed when I stripped it down, and you'll see pictures in the build thread, how clean the bike was, the fact that it had never really been used. It had been stolen pretty much brand new. Just made my life a lot easier when I was stripping it down. But it does mean the other thing that I've modified, I suppose I should touch on that, is there's no key for the bike. I run a keyless ignition system, and that was just an aftermarket piece of electronics that allows me with a little key fob to isolate the bike. Otherwise, I can just start it with a push of the button when the key fob's in the right place. And it gives me an alarm as well. So if you knock and move the bike around, the alarm will sound. So all in one, I thought that was a pretty cool system. Actually, while we're talking about electronics, this is going to go on this video, I think. I do have in here Rapid Bike Evo 2. fueling controller. Obviously the bike is not very similar to a standard CB500. It has been on the dyno, it has been mapped. The Evo 2 just allows some fine tuning on that. So if I make any changes or there's any changes in fuel quality or the bike, the air intake or something starts to slow down, that can manage small changes, not great big ones, but certainly small changes. And then I will touch on, somebody asked me why the speedo wasn't working in the video from Adventure Rider. I've got a speedo healer in here and I managed to damage the connector cable for the speedo healer. I fixed that now with a new cable, but that's why you'll see in some of the video, it will read 0 on the dash and it runs really rough when it doesn't know what speed it is. That's part of the fueling and the ECU. So yeah, I think that touches everything. Can't think of anything else. If there are any other questions, please drop them in the comments. And thank you very much. Thank you for everybody that's following now on Instagram. It's brilliant. And the subscribers that have come to YouTube. Hoping to get some more videos running soon. I'm off to Spain in the end of May. We'll be taking this bike with me. The new Cove Rally won't be here by then, so definitely taking this bike with me. And if you're interested in doing it, I'm going out there as part of Austin Vince's Vince event. I'm teaching road map reading out there as part of that event. I'm there to help and give advice. If you want to, I'll drop a link to Austin's events in the details as well. It's a fantastic event. I'm a big fan. And that's about it. I think we'll wrap up there.